All right, we're back in the paint room. I came in last night and turned this over and finished the priming, both top and bottom. Before we get to the paint, there's one very important task that has to be done. This is synthetic steel wool. It's a plastic coated with a superfine abrasive. See this prime stuff, I'm in a sealed paint room with a blower sucking air through a filter, so it's a filtered room. But what happens is you get overspray. There's a lot of overspray on this, especially from this primer that I use. And so the finish is kind of dusty. And what this stuff does is you just kind of go over it pretty approximately. You don't have to do a particularly good job. You just have to cover every inch of it with some strokes, and it takes all that overspray off and leaves a nice smooth finish. And underneath you can feel what a nice hard undercoat this primer leaves, and this is just what you need it creates a great base for the finish coat. And otherwise, when you feel it, normally it just feels dusty and gritty. It feels like there's something wrong. And so you just give it a light rub with this steel wool, and it becomes delightful. I've got these old pieces. They're all kind of crumpled up and kind of worn out. At a certain point, I'm gonna have to get some new pieces. But again, this is not finish work. This is all undercoat. So you're not going for perfection here. You're just going for the mechanics of this. You want to get in the joints. It kind of seems in a way like it's overkill, but the payoff comes in the finish coat. When after the top coat, I'm going to spray paint this gloss black, and when the top coat goes on, that you don't have to sand. It'll take its smoothness. It's a much thicker paint than the primer. The primer is very thin and it's made to adhere really well, whereas the finish coat is thick and self-leveling. So as long as you don't spray too much and get it so it puddles, the finish coat will do its job if you've done the underlayments. Everything in painting is about the prep. And the thing about this kind of a finish is it's really hard to tell. It's really hard to tell the difference between this finish and powder coat. One of my projects is to do a powder coat oven, but that's a project I've been working on for 7 years, and I'm still nowhere near done. Someday. But if with just conscientious prep work with the paint of washing it with TSP, wiping it down with denatured alcohol, doing a really good job on the prime coat. It's a single coat, that's all. But do a thorough job getting in all the joints, making sure that the welds and the little corners are covered. I cover them first because that way I can see what I've done and make sure that I've got them good. Because in there in the corners is where rust is going to begin. And if you do that conscientious prep work, you get a great paint job that looks and feels a lot like powder coating and will last the way powder coating will last. And I do it all with rattle cans. And I hate cleaning sprayers. I've got a sprayer over there, and I keep lacquer in it. I use it on woodworking projects, and I like it because the thing about lacquer is it's thinned with VOCs, so if the sprayer ever jams up, I can just take the whole thing apart and toss it into a bucket with lacquer thinner, and I can clean it back down to bare metal. With anything water soluble, you can't do that. A lot of paints and stuff, you can't do that. But lacquer, you can. It's really delightful. And so it's always there. All I have to do is bring a project in. It can be 6 months between projects. I can bring it in and blast it with the lacquer, and it just comes right out of the spray can. But for paint and for other finishes, you're mixing, and then you're cleaning your paintbrush, your sprayer, your paint sprayer, your airbrush, and I hate that. I hate that cleanup work, and so it's very much worth it to me to use rattle cans. So this is a big project, this table, and it uses just about two cans of primer and about 2 cans of top coat of the black. And I don't know. I suppose if I were more conscientious, and I would spray paint. I would use less disposable resources. I throw away a lot of rattle cans. But like so many makers, I love to make things, and finishing is a thing that I force myself to do. And in the early days, I used to make stuff like this. I would just weld it up out of steel, and then I would deploy it. And after it got outside, or it got moist, or it rained or something, it would just turn into rust. And I used to tell myself, oh yeah, that's patina, that's attractive, people like that. And then I finally sort of snapped out of it, snapped back to reality, and realized it was just butt ugly, it was unpleasant to touch, and it didn't look that good. It just looked like I was a slacker, and I felt like I was a slacker. So I said, okay, I'm gonna figure out how to make a coating, do a coat that's simple, easy, bulletproof, doesn't demand a lot of finesse, but something I can fling together and be dependable. And that's when I worked this out, and if you do these steps, you get great results. I see other makers, and what they do, especially makers like me who like to make mechanisms, what they do is they weld up their mechanisms, and then they get their can of black spray paint out and spray it. And I just cringe now when I look at that, because I go, that's not going to work. It just doesn't have the kind of staying power of a good prep job and a good prime coat. See the bottom. See, this is a footrail. This is a dining table. And so what's going to happen is people are going to put their feet, they're going to put their feet on these rails. All right, I've dropped both of them. You have to be really careful. These corners, this is the tabletop goes on this. So I carefully rounded these so people won't cut themselves with their knees. But the part that goes up against the tabletop itself is razor sharp, and a sharp corner there. I've already cut myself once with them, and you got to be careful. So as I was saying, people are going to rest their feet on these rails here. So the quality of the paint job here matters, not so much the quality of the of the smoothness of the finish and the attractiveness of the color, because people aren't going to be down here unless they've had too much to drink. But it's going to take a lot of abuse from partygoers and revelers and wedding guests. So the key here is just be thorough. Make sure you get everything. Because, you know, the part that you miss is the part that some wedding guest is going to put their hand on it and go, ooh, where did they get this? But I love it when people look at my stuff and go, oh, it's powder coated. They go, yeah, no. All right, now there's a bunch of dust on it. I've got the blower going. You can probably hear the roar. But the most wonderful thing in the universe, shop air. Blow all that dust off. All right. Okay, now we are ready for paint. Okay, there's a little bit of this black paint, a little bit left in this can. It may or may not come out. Old cans, there's probably just a little bit left in here, so I may have to throw it out. But I'm starting on the underside of the mechanical stuff. This is the stuff that really nobody will see and nobody will touch and nobody will care about. So that's where I'm going to start. But again, where I like to begin the painting is in these little corners where the little welds are, just to make sure that they get their coverage. But I'm going to start here now on these guys. I've found that the finish colors, especially this gloss black, is when the cans sit for a little while, they get not so good, and so you've got to be careful using them to spray something you put a lot of effort into. Although I have to say this can is working just fine. This is just your run-of-the-mill paint. You can get cheaper paint, but not a lot cheaper than this. It's just right out of the big box store. Yeah, it's starting to give up. The one thing you never do with a can of spray paint is hold the nozzle down and do this and move it around, because that's pretty much a recipe for getting runs and splotches. So instead, you do that business where you start, if you want to paint here, you start painting now. So you go across what you want, and then you stop out here. So you get a nice, smooth, even application from side to side. And again, it takes a lot of discipline that a lot of makers don't have. That's why I like these handles. They make it a little easier so my fingers don't get tired when I do the right thing. All right. Got another one. And this will probably take a full can, maybe a little bit more, we'll see. I put a circulation fan in here so that, and it's on a Wi-Fi controlled plug, so I can turn it on and off from a distance. I can set it to go on for an hour or two and then go off. So after the paint is, well, it's tacky. There's a lot of just overspray dust in this room. It's not that clean. Although there isn't, I'm right next to a wood shop, so there's no sawdust in here. That's what really messes with your paint job. But what happens is after the paint is no longer tacky, I'll turn that fan on, I'll circulate the air, and it will help it to dry a little faster without covering it with yuts, with fuzz. And if I turn it on now, I'll just stir up all this powdered overspray, and I'll just ruin the paint job. Okay, so now what I do is I want to get into the into these joints. I make sure. Oh, that's good. See, that was too much. That was too liquidy. I got too close, gave it too much paint out of a fresh can. That's nice. And there. Because I really want to make sure that all those joints have good coating of paint in them. I need a bigger paint room. So I always start with the prime coat on the bottom, and then when that's dry, I flip it over and I finish the prime coat on the top. Then I flip it over and I start with the finish coat on the bottom. So the bottom gets a coat, and that's good enough for me. The top is where the abuse comes, and so what I'll do is when I'm done spraying the bottom, I have to wait. The primer dries really quick. The top coat takes longer to dry. I have to wait until it's hard enough so that me and a helper can flip this thing over. And when we turn it right side up, then I can put a finish coat on the top. This is going to be the coat that people see. And then what I can do is I can wait, let's say 8 or 10 hours, and then I can come back and I can give it another coat while the first coat is still very soft. And so I call it a coat and a half, but it's a lot of good coverage, and it works really well. And I don't have to wait and sand in between coats, and it's fairly easy. Again, it's all about labor saving for a guy who doesn't really like to paint that much. I have to be careful spraying the finish color left-handed, because I'm not that good left-handed. A lot of joints in this big table. And you want to get each joint from 2 different angles. So when I turn this right side up, I'll do the exact same thing. I'll hit those joints first, and just to make sure that everything is well covered. Okay, I think I got them. Okay, now I have this nice lift table. It really helps. So what I'm going to do is I can I can paint the bottom ones and drop it down and get these, have a little better angle on these. So again, you start spraying off and you finish spraying off. So you go like this. And the idea is you go a smooth, uninterrupted motion. You have to move your whole body to do it. Or as much of my body as moves, you know, like that. Same thing going across. It's better to undercoat than the first pass. And you wait a couple of minutes, you go over here and paint that, and then you come back and you get you can complete the gaps in the middle without causing a run. Whereas if you insist on getting all the coverage, you're going to get a run. See, there's that stripe there. It's still not full coverage, but if I go in there and spray that, I'll get a run. So I'll leave it and come back to it later. It's hard to get those. All right, again. What I do is I spray the corners, and I'll go on the other side and I'll spray this corner. And then I'll fill in on the flat sides as needed. So that way the corners get priority. You never miss a corner. Because if you miss here, it's not as big a deal as missing there, because that's where the wear is going to hit. Starting to look like something. Okay. See, the smart thing to do is to spray the stuff farther away from you first. This thing rolls really freely. I'm getting the inside of these mounting brackets. The only purpose for these cross pieces is they secure the top of the table to the base, or the base to the top. So they don't have to be pretty, but they have to be functional. And you don't want them to rust out. So I don't care if it's drippy in there. See, once they've had the opportunity to sit, I can come back and give them a little bit more without fear of it dripping. You have to find a way that works for you, and you don't need to paint like stuff is going to last forever if you don't want to. And I see a lot of guys who are doing they're doing maker style experimentation on the web, and so they whack stuff with a rattle can. I mean, it's Mythbusters style. They would spray paint cars before they drove them off cliffs. And that's a very reasonable thing to do. But if you're trying to make a piece of furniture that you expect to serve you for a decade or two, then you have to take these pains. Either that or you're going to watch it deteriorate before your eyes. And I don't want to see that. But like I say, I don't find finishing all that much fun, so it's a matter of finding a way to get done what needs to be done without it being a real pain. All right. That's the lower stuff is pretty good. There's some little gaps, but I'll get them when I turn this thing over. See there, that needs a little bit on here. Now, I've put a lot of paint on this. And there's not a single drip. Okay. This is a handy tool to have. Oh yeah. Now, paint the bottoms. They're gonna rub. Okay. At a different height, a different angle, you can see all kinds of things you couldn't before. Get the inside top corner. See, sometimes you'll see me go back, I'll go like this and then like that. And it's a risk when you do that because you're putting more paint on. It's because I missed a spot or I wavered a little bit. But you notice that I'm still doing that business where I'm starting to move first and paint second. I'm gonna see, like I missed a spot here. I'll get it later. Feet bottom. One place where it doesn't matter if you get drips there. Yeah, see? Too much paint in one spot. All right. Yeah, see, I start to walk and it gets wobbly. It's a lot like wood turning. This paint can's giving out. It's starting to spray really sketchy. I don't like it. The paint's coming out thin and then splurting out. Yeah. I'm cheap, so I want to get the last, there's about that much in it. About as much as in the can I started with, but it's not worth it. Because what's going to happen is it hurts my painting technique, and I'm going to get blotches, I'm going to get drips. It's going to look ugly. It's not worth it. I worked with a chef once, and he taught me how to chop parsley. And he said, how do you know when you're done chopping parsley? When you think you're done, keep chopping. It's the same way with stirring paint or epoxy, you know? How do you know when you're done stirring? When you think you're done, keep going. Now you can see as it dries, you can see there's some thin spots here because it's got a little orange peel. It didn't have enough paint on it to level the way you'd want it to. On the bottom side, it's not that much of a deal. On the top, it is. Orange peel is where it's got that little, looks like an orange peel texture. All right, now, make sure before you spray it on your good work. Okay, now, oh yeah, oh yeah, smooth like butter. See, I'm getting enough paint on that to get that orange peel texture off. And I can do it because the orange peel coat is not, it's dried a little bit. All right, here's that orange peel. It's sticky, it's tacky. It's not wet. Nice. See, now the thing about these guys is they're going to get painted from the other side when I flip this over. So if it fades a little pale, a little thin on the bottom side, that's okay, because I'm going to get it when I do the outer corner and the inner corner from on top. So I have to make sure that everything you can see from down below I've got really good. So now it's time for a second coat on the foot bottoms. Yeah, see, I got a nasty blotch right there. If that was on the side, that'd be dripping. I was too close. But you know, on the bottom of the foot, I don't really care. I did it again. Okay, this needs a little bit more. It's a real luxury having a paint booth, a finishing room, because I don't have any gusts blowing my spray around. It's nice and still in here, and yet I don't have to wear a lot of protection because it's sucking the air out. I missed a spot in here. Did I miss a spot out here? I know I missed a spot here. Oh, this whole side's not done. It's tough having a 6-foot-long table in the middle of a room this size. All right, I want to check that end. It's looking good. All right. There's a spot. There we go. Okay. Looking good. Got about a half a can left. Might be enough to do the top. Maybe not. I like it. Okay. I'm going to set this to run for an hour. Yeah, got to get it from the top now. All right.